All right, hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome. Welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I'm still kind of recovering from a little bit of what I'm referring to as a physical upgrade. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm gonna roll right into this. This is part 2 of a video that I recently did about a blog post that I shared. Um, and the title of that blog post, as soon as I find it, I will share with you. You can read along with me if you'd like to, or you can go back and watch the previous video that I did. It was quite long. I'd be surprised if anybody made it through that video. If you did, wow, thank you. That's awesome. Maybe you want to take it in increments. Maybe you don't want to watch it at all. Um, but if you're looking for a light language video, I will not be doing light language in this video. This is a channeled writing that I do, a style of writing that incorporates different types of wording, different mathematical frequencies from the downloads and uploads that I'm sharing with everybody that I receive, how I receive them. And what I decided to do was start sharing the meaning behind some of the things that I've written, decoding the code, so to speak. Although this is just the tip of the iceberg, so some of it still may not make sense, but I have fun with this. I hope you guys will too. And the other reason I'm being encouraged to do this is I am encouraging others to play in this way, because there's a lot of people out there that are already doing this and they're just not sharing it, just like the light language or just like channeling, or whatever it might be, artwork, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be spoken word. It can be dance. It can be certain science that maybe people are getting downloads about, information about the earth that people are getting downloads about, which is all a form of channeling from one perspective. So what I'm going to do is I invite you to go back and listen if that's something you feel guided to do. I do read the whole post in video number 1. And then I go through the whole first portion of the video. I just ran out of time and energy, quite frankly, to finish this very long blog post. They all won't be this long, but this is just the end of that particular writing. So this video won't be as long if I get on the ball and get going here. Or you can read along with me on carrieavon.com and just look at the blog post, which is labeled Plucking the Chords, Alpha Beta Soup, Letter Geometry. Because that's essentially what's going on with the way that I write, and a lot of other people write. It holds within it a frequency, and the frequency can be felt sometimes. We may read it and not know why we remember certain things or it activates certain things. And a lot of people, like I said, are tapping into this in their own way. I'm just sharing from my guidance experience, from my guides, how this works for me. This is tapping into as above, so below, as within, so without. So we can take this and move it into many different dimensions, literally. It's tapping into a multidimensionality. It's talking about our DNA sometimes. Sometimes what comes through can be utilized as a living light language that is a form of communication between all networks and all aspects. So some of this language is computer programming language, because where did the language for computer programming come from? It came from us, or it came from higher versions of ourselves from one perspective, so to speak. I do say a lot of so to speak and from one perspective, because there's many different perspectives that we can look at this from, many different angles. I talk a little bit about light, living light codes in the first video. So if you don't know anything about this, or you've never read anything and you just happen to come across my writings this the first time, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first video, just because I explain a little bit about the language from my view. So I'm going to skip almost to the end, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give the decoding, so to speak, from the coding. And so before I do that, one other thing I'd love for you to keep in mind is that, again, this can be, some of this is referencing our bodies. Some is referencing changes in the earth, changes in the cosmos, social, political, economic, again, computers, organic geometry, artificial intelligence, and sometimes we're talking about, I've forgotten a few things, but it could be from past, future, all kinds of different, the elementals. So it just depends on what exactly we're mapping into when we go in. And I say we, it's myself, my guides, my team, I guess we could call it, that I'm sharing with you guys. So the last portion that I read, and I'm going to read this. I could share screen. I didn't share screen. I shared screen last time, so I'll probably share screen again this time. But I wrote, as you allow yourself to commingle in this network, you exchange viable information that allows you to create waves, weave. I'll just read this last part. As you allow yourself to commingle in this network, you exchange viable information that allows you to create waves, weave certain reference points into your understanding, into your nature or your understanding of nature. And I talked a little bit about that. Basically, it changes our perspective of everything as we allow ourselves to commingle in this network that we're creating and that has already been created from one perspective. And this is all done through waves, right? Or particles, if you want to see it, this particle wave exchange, or charge, right? This charge, this plasma. For we are weaving codes in every given moment, so to speak. We are weaving codes during every interaction in which you allow these code dependencies, play on words, code-dependent singular node networks, then light up the refractory board, olfactory. This light up creates the ability. So this is a play on words as well. And I'm kind of revising this as I go because this is always changing and always growing as my understanding of it grows, right? It's just like when you read a book, you go back and you read it from a different perspective and you go, oh, I missed that sentence the first time. This lights up the refractory board. This light up creates the ability to move out of division and into revision, re-envisioning the scope of what it is that you are creating. So I'm going to keep reading and then I'll come back. I am seeing a flag as I'm writing this and thinking of what a flag really represents. I am seeing red, white, and blue. I am hearing united in division, so to speak. For the division is a false flag, which takes me into a different spin. Yes and no. The geometries that you are speaking allows you to map into these different sequencing sets, sequential sets, quintessential sets, quintuplets, frequency sets, seeing into the frequencies. So from one perspective, we will go into what is playing out on the web, so to speak. I'm just gonna pause for a moment. Oh boy, my phone rang and I lost my place. All right, I think I was on quintuplets. Frequency sets, seeing into the frequencies. So from one perspective, we will go into what is playing out on the web, so to speak. For the web is the feedback system to tell you what is being accessed on the inside of being in excess, in access. So I'll come back to all of this. And so this certain flow and trajectory allows you to set up, ring true, set up a ringer. For these words allow you to break the spell and allows you to spell the break, if you will. Point break, Brody. I'll come back to that. And so as you allow yourself to quell, crow, calm all doubts and fears based around these frequency pattern networks that you are recognizing, creating, remembering, we then set a new core, a new chord, if you will. I am seeing back to the letter string, like letters being chorded on a guitar. And it basically adds strength and string. So more strings added to an old guitar, it changes the whole scope of the way the information is accessed, the way it sounds, the harmony, the frequency, and the order of things. It adds a higher order, like a different or added dimension. So these sublets, subsets, and harmonics, everyone is capable of accessing if they choose to. Yet there are those of you that have chosen to speak your voice in such a communicable way that it allows for those that are seeking communion with the oneness of source self codes, codes source self, codes that are sourced from the self, a deeper sense of self, ego self versus higher self. So as we share these unwinding principles with all selves, if you will, all selves on deck, there becomes a deeper semblance of freedom, resemblance, deeper symbolism, deeper resell balance. So let us light up the board, if you will. Let us light up the grid. Let us line up wavy lines and lights. Let us regurgitate that which is still usable, that which was under subjugate, that which is non-usable. We can then explode and move into implode. This allows us to break down the principles that have been built up on fluff, so to speak, and allows us to continue, use the intuition, nutrition, recognizing that all of the layers and subsets in which you linguistically tap into allows you to pull it up from source, pulling it out of the maple tree like maple syrup, and then break it down for efficiency, energy, a higher efficiency. And then I kind of ended. So I am seeing that even in this word soup, it is actually creating a certain amount of efficiency, because much of the stagnation in the holding patterns of the words and letters is now being broken up. And we are seeing how fluid the living light language can be and become. It has been this already. And we are remembering, and we are weaving it with all intelligences, doing it from the heart, creating a new code. So I added some links at the bottom of this. I always do that. I don't always add them all, to kind of break down what it is that I'm decoding, so to speak, and show some synchronicities. So I'm just going to pause this for a moment, and I'm going to share screen and go back and break this down a little bit. Okay, so I'm screen sharing right now, and essentially what I wanted to get into was, where did I go? Oh, okay. So I already talked about the interaction. We're weaving codes in every given moment, so to speak. Can you guys see that okay? I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. I think you can see it, but I'm just gonna go one more time. We're weaving codes in every given moment, right? In every interaction. So I'm bringing up, when we interact with one another, we are creating something, right? And I put, which you allow these code dependencies. Every time I put POW, it's a play on words. POW, play on words. Codependent singular node networks. Oh, this is what I wanted to, okay. So I just went into essentially single node networks, and a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, we allow these code dependencies. We see this codependency that we have around certain belief structures, certain structures. But what we're breaking through is we're creating codes that we are now becoming our own code breakers. We're becoming self-aware. We are becoming dependent on these codes because we are the ones creating them through our own actions, through weaving them and interacting with one another. That's what this means in this sentence, in which you allow these codependencies. We see them. We see where we're codependent, and we're now becoming code dependent because we become independent. And I need to rewrite this a little bit and add more to it, but codependent singular node networks. Now, if I go into a singular node network, a network can be defined as the interconnection between various communication devices that are connected through different communication links. These are used for exchanging the data as well as resources by connecting two or more elements in a limited area, which is known as a network. It talks about covering in all of each field. I'm going to pause just for a moment and get to the juice. And I am on elprocus.com, which you can see at the top there, elprocus.com, cus.com. Okay, from there, I just went into network science. So this is on Wikipedia. I just love this picture, by the way. I have to share that. What? This is what I see all the time when I'm working with all kinds of things. This is what it looks like. This is us. This is the brain. These are our synapses, right? This is a partial map of the internet. Can you believe that? That's what it looks like. It's amazing. It's beautiful. We are creating a new internet, a new web, and this is what we look like. As within, so without. An internet looks like our brain. It looks like the synapses and the nerves and the body, right? So I just think that's so interesting. It talks about each line is drawn between two nodes. It represents two IP addresses. Oh, this is a whole other thing that I wrote about. I write about C notes all the time. C notes, C nodes. And look at this. They're all through different colors. So you've got military, government, education. I don't even know what these other things are. Unknown. What's the white? It's unknown. This is so funny. It represents less than 30% of the Class C networks reachable by the data collection program. And this is back in 2005. So who knows what it's at now. But it's just so cool to kind of look at this stuff and really kind of wrap our brains, so to speak, around it. But network science is also studying telecommunication, computer, biological, semantic. I don't even know what that is. Between concepts. Ooh, a form of knowledge representation and social networks. So I have so much I could go into here, but essentially this is what we're playing with. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste that and add it to the link in case anybody wants to look at it. I'm going to go back to, I lost it. There it is. Okay. So basically we're single, right? We're single node networks, but we're connecting and we're lighting up the refractory board. There's more, because if you go back in, oh, I lost it. I'll have to maybe come back in and write a little bit more about this, but play with that, because the single network nodes actually is a tool that is utilized in order to create something else. And isn't that what we're doing? We're creating. It lights up the refractory board. So I wanted to go in and, sorry guys, I'll get this right. All right, so refractory. What is refractory? It's a material that is resistant to decomposition, excuse me, by heat, pressure, or chemical attack, and retains its strength and form at high temperatures. So I'm going back to the dashboard. A little slow because I have so many things open. And basically it says that we are lighting up this refractory board. But then I put olfactory, which has to do with vision, our eyes, our sight, our sense of seeing things. And this is another layer into this. So remember I said earlier, we have physical, we have social, we have economic. Wherever we take this out into, it really shows the micro to the macro from this perspective. And basically it's lighting up this high, the ability, this light up creates the ability to move out of division and into revision. So we're seeing things again, not just revision like we're revising it, we're seeing it. We're like, oh, I remember this. I am seeing this. I'm moving out of this division and into revision, and then I'm re-envisioning. So it's kind of like we're taking what we had and we're, you know, when you take everything down to the struts or to the base of a building, and then you rebuild around that. And you add a stronger foundation, but you still use some of the pieces for, like, let's say it's an historical complex. Basically, it could be all brand new, but there's certain things that are required in order to contain that particular remnants of history. So that's a whole other ball of wax, but this is re-envisioning the scope of what it is that we are creating. So we're seeing it completely differently. But I'm also seeing this as a reference to computers, science having to do with our body is upgrading our pineal gland, our third eye, our olfactory senses. And what I keep hearing is all senses on, all factories, all faculties. Oh, I got to add that. See, this is how it works. All factories. I'm going to say all faculties, right? Not only all faculties, like all facilities, all falsities. Oh my goodness. This is how it works when I go in and I actually dissect what's going on. So I'm going to pause just for a moment. And as I write this, I'm hearing false cities. Ooh, and that takes me into a whole other spin. I'm going to write that up too, because there's a lot of places that have been created on a false system. What is a city? It's a dwelling. It's a place where a group of people live and interact, right? And that's a whole other, more I'm going to add to maybe on a future video. But this light up creates the ability to move out of division and into revision. So remember, I said in the previous one, a false flag. Oh, maybe I didn't. I said the next one. Just kidding. So move out of division and into revision, re-envisioning the scope of what it is you are creating. As I was saying this, I was seeing a flag and thinking of what a flag represents. So a flag for most people represents unity, right? It represents a certain country, a certain school, a certain container, and it's represented by that flag, right? And as I'm saying red, white, and blue, I'm hearing, for example, it's being united in division. So even though we're seeing that everything seems like it's divided, many of us are actually uniting. And so there's this false flag that is being thrown out in this particular representation. And in actuality, the flags in general can be seen as false, because what are they based on? They're based on, and this is not said as if, because we have high regard and appreciation for all of our fellow humans, all of our fellow beings who have been a part of our history, who have perhaps fought and died for what they believed in. But was it, from one perspective, it may have been necessary to do that. But from a higher perspective, that was false, because if we were truly living from our hearts and loving one another, we wouldn't need war, right? So there's this perception that's been created that we're divided, that this country needs this and this country needs that, and we have to fight the survival of the fittest, the Darwinian concept, the Newtonian physics, right? All of that is not, it may have been true based on a particular system, maybe in the old system. But from this broader vantage point from the new network, that's false. It's no longer the reality that we are choosing to play in moving forward. And so essentially, I see this as united in division. So they're creating this false flag, but this is actually creating a united wave, if you will. And I'm hearing, long may you wave, right? That is the heart. That is a heart frequency that as you do that long wave, it's not as scattered. You can't pull it apart because it's unified. And then this took me into a different spin. So once I said that, I said it was like yes and no. That's true and it's not true. So I was seeing this as, from one perspective it is, and from another perspective that was correct based on an old system. But now on this new system moving forward, that's not necessary. That's just being brought up in order to try to recreate false cities, false old networks. And this has to do with the old internet as well. This has to do with all the old systems. I put the geometries that you are speaking. So when we speak in language, we're also speaking, each letter holds a certain frequency, and it even turns into computer code, right? Which I know nothing about in this skin suit. But you know, A equals 1. You know, we have how many letters in the alphabet? And let's put a value system to each letter. That then creates a geometry, and it allows us to map into these sequential sets. So it helps us to put things in order. When we sequence something, right? Sequential sets, quintessential sets, quintuplets. So I'll go back to share. Well, I'll pause this for a moment. So if I go into share screen and we talk about the quintessential sets, I like to use this one website, and I always mispronounce it, but I'm just going to spell it out. ETYM online. It talks about the most refined, consisting of the nature of quintessence. That's what I was trying to find, was quintessence in the first place. So if I go back to the geometries that you are speaking, allows you to map into these different sequencing sets. It allows us to map into a certain order of things. The essence, it talks about a pure essence latent in all things, and the substance of which the heavenly bodies are composed. Literally, fifth essence. I love this. This is just so fun. And it's talking about to be. It allows us to map into this just being. And 5. And what is it that so many of us are talking about embodying right now? 5D, bringing it in, anchoring it in. So by doing this, we're breaking the spell, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So we play into this new sequence, quintessential sets, quintuplets. And if I go into quintuplet, basically it's a combination of 5 of a kind. Oh, I could go into so many different spins, right? But thinking about that too, quintuplets actually for me has to do with child. It's this inner child that we're birthing in this 5D, right? In this, but it's not just about 5D. That's just one portion of this. I'm just wondering if I actually am still recording. Yes, I am. So it allows us to see into these frequencies. So from one perspective, we will go into what is playing out. So basically this is saying, okay, let's talk about that for a moment. This false flag, it's played out, like it's out there now. It's still there, but it's playing out. It's just has to end. It's like when you're watching a movie and you just have to get all the way to the end before you can, you know, it still has an ending. We'll put it that way. It's playing out on the web, so to speak. So we could go into so many different layers here, because not only is the old, this play is being shown to us on television, on the internet. We're getting it in pop-ups. It's just the old algorithms. For the web is the feedback system to tell you what is being accessed on the inside. So remembering that oftentimes what we're seeing outside is a reflection of what's going on the inside. And many of us would say, okay, well, that's not me. And maybe it isn't who we are, but it's things that we've bought into. It's the old matrix. It's the old reality that the old cities were built on. I'm hearing, we built this city on rock and roll, right? So it's like, well, what if rock and roll has taken on a whole new meaning? Then that old stuff doesn't it's played out. And it tells us what's being accessed on the inside of being in excess. So I was writing about in excess. It was like, so that was the old system was in excess. It was material want, more. And it also tells us what we're accessing, where we're at this crossroads from one perspective. It's, excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Okay, gone. And so this certain flow and trajectory allows you to set up, ring true, and set up a ringer. So I'm breaking this down because essentially, by us staying on this path, what we're doing is we are ringing true, literally like you're ringing a bowl. We are creating these sounds. We're creating these rings like dolphins do in the ocean, the bubbles that are literally implosive bubbles. And that's something that I think is very important. I think they're called, I talked about this in a previous video, Solomon luminescence, soluminescence. So I invite you to look that up, but we are creating that. And in essence, we're creating our truth, our new truth, based on our new perspective, based on being in this fifth element, which also is relevant as well because quintessential. We're bringing in this fifth element. We are the fifth element. If you guys have ever seen that movie, and we're setting up a ringer. So if we look at this just for a moment, the funny thing about all of this is, I mean, it's just a play on words. It's fun, but before I forget, going back to this quintessential. So we're setting up a ringer, this soluminescence, and it's the rings. If you think about the teachings of Dan Winter, for example, I always bring him up, and we're talking about time. We're talking about rings of implosion, this heart frequency, centripetal. I never say that right. Centripetal. I like to say centripetal because I think of a pedal. I think of pedaling. I always play with that word a little bit. But if I go back into share screen and I look up back to quintessence, it's talking about to be, but it also goes into ether, to the four elements. So quintessence was added by Aristotle to the four known elements. So it's the fifth element, and it's said to permeate all things, naturally bright, incorruptible, and endowed with circular motion. Now, I didn't know this when I recorded this, exactly what it meant. But then when I go into the circular motion and I talk about, oops. Oh, did I skip the crows and the galactic? Oh, wow, that's okay. So, oh no, I got to that. So it says set up a ringer, ring true. We are the fifth element, this quintessential. We're creating these rings, these bubbles, if you will. There's so many different ways of looking at it. And in addition to that, we're setting up a ringer. So I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure positive, but I think that's like, oh, we're going to set up a real ringer. Almost like we're capturing things with our bubbles. We're setting up the ringer for these particular, we could call them nefarious energies that were being used for different purposes than what we want in the fifth frequency, in this lower, in this higher density, right? Or no, that's basically less density. I don't want more density. We want less density. So as we create these bubbles, as we set up these rings, it's a tone. My friend Kat calls them rings of harmony, right? It's literally these sounds, these bubbles that we're creating. And this captures, like the dolphins use those bubbles to harness certain things. And if you go into quintessence, endowed with circular motion, its extraction was one of the chief goals of alchemy. Well, this extraction is us in pure form, going back to our centripetal, this force, this is what we create when we create that long wave of being in the heart. I also saw, what was it? Five of a kind. Did I already cover that? Okay, so we're creating this. This allows us to break the spell. We're setting up a ringer. So we're capturing what was maybe harnessed before in so many different ways, And we are the ones that are breaking that spell because we are the alchemists, essentially. We're creating a new alchemy. And it allows you to spell the break. So that's computer coding for the new internet, for the new financial system, for the new whatever we want to call it, if you will, point break. So, Brody, so I could play with that, and I'm pretty sure I could go into many different realms there, but obviously I'm referring to the movie Point Break and Brody. Well, what does Brody do? That came through, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. So if I think about that, if you guys haven't watched the movie Point Break, it is a classic. My sister just was telling me the other day, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm watching the movie Point Break, and I forgot how good it was. But in Point Break, Brody, I'm not going to do a spoiler alert. I'm just going to say he rides a very big wave, huge wave, right? In addition to that, Brody has something to do with the monetary system and breaking the banks. And what does he wear when he goes into these establishments and breaks the banks and then goes and rides waves? So this is not a suggestion to that we're essentially robbers robbing, but we are the ones now that are creating these new codes. So we're essentially the ones that are creating this new system. And in doing that, it's like I'm just saying that, like, in this essence, it's like that's a good thing, right? Not that we should do that. That's certainly not saying we should rob anybody, because that isn't the quintessence, right? That isn't the true fifth element. That's going back into the field of material and matter. But it's a play on words. So, if you will, allows you to break the spell. Brody. So, as you allow yourself to quell, caw, crow. So, remembering the term eat crow. So, there's some like that are going to maybe have to eat crow and that's okay. It isn't like, oh, we're going to make that person eat crow. I don't even know where that theme came from. Poor crows. But anyways, crows are shapeshifters. They're magicians. In the Native American, many of the Native Americans believe that they are, the shamans use them a lot, and they bring messages. So the crows talk. They actually speak, and they work as family. They work as a unit. So we're cawing out these codes, and then essentially calm all doubts and fears based around these frequency pattern networks that we are creating, we are recognizing, we are remembering. And then this sets a new core foundation, a new core set of values and integrity. Chord, if you will. So I saw, back to what I read in my previous video about the same writing, this stringing the letters together. By the way, this also all has to do with DNA. We're adding more to the DNA. We're adding more to, I loved the fact that we're adding more to all of it. So our DNA is not only activating, but we're adding more threads. We don't just have a double helix to a triple to, I don't even know how many, but that's changing. That's activating. And we're activating these letters, like the strings being chorded on a guitar. It adds strength and strength. So not only does it make it stronger, but it adds, it changes the whole sound. Back to the rings, the sound, it increases our diversity in unity. Whew. So more strings to an old guitar. So remember, we still have the old guitar. It's still there, but we're adding to it. Our bodies maybe are our old guitar, for example. Our financial system is an old guitar. Our social platform, our internet, but we're adding to it, and we're dissolving what no longer fits. And this changes the way information is accessed, because as we activate our DNA, we're accessing more information and the way that we go about it. So it's not necessarily going to be because somebody else tells us. We're just going to know. Oftentimes, it changes the way it sounds, the harmony, the frequency, and the order of things. It adds a higher order, like an added dimension, which is the fifth dimension, right? And more. So these sublets, subsets, and harmonics, everyone is capable of accessing if they choose to. Yet, there are those of you that have chosen to speak your voice in such a communicable way that it allows for those that are seeking community and communion with the oneness of source self codes, codes source self, codes that are sourced from self, a deeper sense of self. So basically, those that can move in, integrate the ego and activate this higher chord, the chord of oneness with source, right? That full stream. So there are those that are already doing this and those that are seeking to do this. And everybody can access this. That can, from my perspective, moving out of ego, right? Moving into the heart. Because again, the only way we can go back into what I talked about before, where it was the long wave, the flag, is about the long wave. It's all connected. So that's being in the heart. It's coherence, like the hairs. So this is all a play on words: communicable, fun, friendly. It allows those that are seeking communion, right? A oneness with, communication with, source self code. So we're sourcing these through our higher aspects, our higher self, our oversoul, our higher selves, our guides, our angels, whatever we want to label this as, all coming from source. And this gives us a deeper sense of who and what we truly are. So as we share these unwinding principles with all selves, if you will, all cells on deck. So I was being shown a deck of cards, and you ever hear when somebody says, oh, they're not playing with a full deck? Well, now we have a full deck, and all of our cells are fully operational when we're getting to this space. And all of our selves, now this could be what's the right word? Complicated from one perspective, because I see things, this is all from my perspective, but I see parallels. I see future versions, past versions, higher versions, lower, not to be negative necessarily, but elementals, things that are within, that are deeply hidden, and then things that are way out there. Although it's really not way out there, it just feels like that. Anyways, in this, I was saying how all cells on deck. So we're pulling everything into deck and all selves. So past, present, future, parallel are all working from one perspective as one, because we are. But it's been much more divided in the past because we haven't recognized, A, that we can tune into that, or B, that we can bring that all in to a similar trajectory, I guess. And that's, I'm not going to go too far into that. So as we share, oh, I said unwinding. Oh, unwinding was about the DNA. So the unwinding principles, we're unwinding. Everything's been tightly bound. And we're opening it up. So if you have a coil and you have DNA on it, or let's say gray matter in the brain, and you essentially open that all up, you see what's inside and you can read it in a sequential order. But if you coil it all together, it looks like a different order because you can't see what's in between. That's from one perspective. So this has to do with also unwinding and getting out of the tangled principles that we've been taught. So a lot of the principles that are cities and our foundation, our ideas and concepts and knowledge were based on in the old world, in the linear, I'm not talking ancient times, I'm talking, recent, in the last couple hundred years, um, essentially is being rebalanced and is being integrated. There becomes a deeper semblance of freedom, resemblance, a deeper symbolism, and then a deeper cell rebalance. So as we do this, everything balances from within to outer. And we see the symbolism in things that we may have not seen the symbolism in before. But it also gives us a deeper sense of, whoa, this is synchronistic. We are free to have a choice. And I'm seeing a play on words on the semblance, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So I'll share screen again. Almost done. So let us light up the board, if you will. And remember, earlier I was shown a refractory board, but in the beginning, I think I was talking about a marquee. So essentially, we're lighting up the motherboard. We're lighting everything up in our bodies. The board, the playing board, the chess board, the, yeah. Let us light up the grid. Let us line up wavy lines and lights. So oftentimes in wavy lines and lights, wavy lines are the long waves. We're looking at radio waves. We're looking at all kinds of waves. Everything is charge, right? So these waves of charge, essentially, we are charging this up, which lights up the motherboard. Let us regurgitate that which is still usable. And I was thinking of a mother bird, right? She eats, she regurgitates it and gives what's left over to the kids. So it's easier to be reassembled into usable knowledge, usable information, and nutrition. Again, a long time ago, I was talking about compost. So it's like composting that which is usable. And it's like having a table that's been repurposed. And that which was under subjugate, that which is non-usable, we can then explode and move into implode. So I'm going to pause this just for a moment. Almost done. Maybe I'm going to pause this. Maybe I'm not. All right, so that which was under subjugate, if I go to subjugation, it means to subdue. So essentially bring under the yoke, but it also, the original was to join. So I see this as, I don't know if it's a juxtaposition that I'm trying to say, or if I'm getting that word confused, but essentially that which was under being subdued, or it wasn't, and this was a play on words. So I was hearing like it was subjected to not being open, it was under rule. So that I got to play with that a little bit more. And I was also showing the older subject, okay, that was held within a gate, like closed. So that was also a play on words. I didn't quite type that up yet. I'll have to come back in and add that. But basically that which is non-usable, we can then explode and move into implode. And also if I go into subjugation briefly, and implode I've talked about quite a bit with us, we have a tendency to think implode it, so we hold everything in and then explode from the inside. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring more to, well, being in oneness in the heart space. I'm referring more into the centripetal force, right? Whoops. And also, if you go look at the definitions, I like to use DuckDuckGo, by the way. That's more of my, I like to look up. It talks about bring under the yoke. So that's what I was looking for. I knew I was like, no, it doesn't mean yoga. But it basically, that was, which was kept under rule. Like it was not even, it's not, and whatever wasn't usable, we can get it out. And when you explode something, all the bits go out everywhere. And then we can take that and integrate those and move into our unification, our oneness, our coherence, right? Okay. That allows us to break down the principles that have been built up on fluff, so to speak. And how many things do we know that are false? Oftentimes, you might go into a store. Have you ever run into, you see like a liquor stand and you accidentally run your cart into that, you know, it's got all those boxes piled up and then you realize it's just an empty display? Um, it's empty. It's principles that have been like entrained, but we're breaking that down because there's nothing to support them anymore. Nothing to support them. Now, I'm also going to bring this up because I mentioned in my last video that this can also play with crypto. I don't want to really get into that too much because I really don't know much about it. But what I will share is I'm getting a lot of information on it and I don't quite understand it yet. I'm still decoding it. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because from what I've seen, this is part of the new system, not necessarily the way crypto was originated or some of the more again, the fluff that's in there is going to that's being reworked as well. And I think we're kind of seeing that right now. We just saw it took a huge dive. But what I've also seen is that you can play with this and take it into the world of that as well. And I'm being guided to go into that briefly. So well, anyways, I'll find it in just a bit. But I just don't want to take quite as much time on this one. So non-usable fluff. There was a site that I clicked on and it was talking about fluff having to do with crypto. So I kind of went into that a little bit. Maybe if I find that, I'll add it later and I'll just post a note in case you guys are nerding out and you made it this far. What I'll do is when I find it, I'll post it in this video in the description at the bottom of the you know, on the YouTube channel. And then I'll add it to the blog as well, because I know it was a link having to do with some article that I read. And if it comes up, I'll remember it, I'll share it in this. And allows us to continue and use the intuition nutrition. Our intuition is what can sometimes really guide us and bring us the nutrients we need. Recognizing that all of the layers and subsets in which you linguistically tap into allows you to pull it from source. So we don't have to go through other principles in order to go directly to the source. Pulling it out of the maple tree like maple syrup. I want to go briefly into maple syrup. The reason is this led me into something I clicked on, led me directly into another tree, but I'm on speaking of which ones. I just think that's so cute. Speaking of which ones.net, I shared this link and it shows the magical maple tree. And it talks about a lot about, oh, I think I remember why. One of the names of this type of tree led me into the next portion. So it talks about balance, practicality. The maple tree was important to the Algonquian tribes of the Northwestern and Western Canada. Canada, Candace. I'm finding that a lot of these connections are reminding us about these certain tribes that we are strongly connecting with through our ancestry, our ancestors. So maple tree holds the wisdom of balance, promise, love, longevity, money, and practical magic. Huh. Oh boy. It represents success and abundance. And here we go. Native Americans used it in trade and could purchase goods with their syrup when no coin could be made or spared. What are we all talking about the new value system, right? We're talking about how a new value system where we're not needing to necessarily exchange coin. Although electronic currency is called a coin, but it's not a real coin. So we're going back to the basics, and I just think that this is very, very symbolic, of course. So I'm talking about, so let me just read that one more time. Not the whole part, just the part about the fluff. You ever had fluff? It's delicious. I haven't had it in years, but I'd never had fluff. I'd always grown up with marshmallow cream. And then my husband, I think, introduced me to fluff like a long time ago. He's like, "You've never had fluff?" And I was like, "This is magical." It's also built on fluff. So it talks about it allows us to pull it from source, pulling it out of the maple tree like maple syrup, and then breaking it down for higher efficiency energy, a higher efficiency. So if I go back to this magical maple tree, so it says, no, we could purchase goods with the syrup when no coin could be made or spared. This goes in so many different directions because it's talking about a new value system. It's talking about us creating this new value system, how much we value each other. Do we value our connection to source, our higher self? We're coming back into that new value system. We're valuing our interaction over the internet and how we interact with not only each other, but artificial intelligence, right? That's changing. Essentially, we're exchanging services instead of necessarily using money to things. We're bartering and going back to the roots. And a new system is being built. And I do see this maybe not forever being cryptocurrency, but I do feel that something is happening in that arena from what I'm getting on this. So I'm going back into, we're going to end on this note. Oops, share screen. So you can read along if you want to. I have to go back to fluff because it did have something to do with crypto. And so I'm seeing that even in this word soup, it is actually creating a certain amount of efficiency because much of the stagnation and the holding patterns of the words and letters is now being broken up. And we are seeing how fluid the living light language can be and become. It has been this already, and we are remembering. We are weaving it with the all intelligence is doing it from the heart, creating a new code. And I went into a little bit as well. There was a maple coin, by the way, that was backed by maple syrup. That was a cryptocurrency, which I thought was interesting. There's a crow token. So you can play with that, whatever you want to, wherever you want to go with that, have at it. But also, as I was saying, well, this has to do with crypto. Well, maybe it doesn't have to do with crypto, or in part it does because it's multidimensional, but it also has to do with cryptomeria, which is a tree. I wrote about taproot. So when we tap into the maple tree, we pull out the maple syrup. Taproot is something that crypto world is working on, right? Or they've already worked on it. It's a new system. It's in the works. But this was a synchronicity in these writings that came up, and it's cryptomeria. It's hidden parts. And I think I talked about this in the previous video, but I'm being guided to talk about this a little bit because we're tapping the root and bringing up the hidden parts. It's all coming up to the surface, and we're remembering, oh wait, there is more to all of this. Now, interestingly enough, yeah, and this is pine tree. I don't know why else I was guided to bring this up. But needless to say, I'll have to come back to that another time if I feel guided to do that. Oh, part of the reason is I was calling it hair, it's called hair tree. And in this codes that I wrote air, H-E-I-R, and H-A-I-R. So I was seeing the connection there. So I'm going to pause just for a moment and end on this note. Okay. So I'm just going to end mostly on that note. I guess fluff is a crypto coin too. Everything's a crypto coin. So not everything that I write about is necessarily something that can be used in the world of crypto. So I wanted to give that as a disclaimer. That doesn't mean that the words that I'm using are anyway saying this is what we should be looking at or investing in. It's just merely a tool to recognize that everything is connected, and we can follow our synchronicity in so many different ways. And oftentimes people would go, well, how do you not get lost in this? And you can, because it is infinite. It's a fractal. It's like when you keep looking, seek and you shall find. What is it that you're seeking? But if you continue to seek and seek and seek and seek, which we always want to do, we're always going to find more and more and more and more. So part of this is just about not necessarily getting lost in it, playing with it, and then kind of pulling back out and anchoring and grounding the energies and the frequencies that come in. So for me, I don't know, I'm learning a little bit about that world, but this isn't just that. There's so much. And there's a new system that we are developing literally as a network, and it's beautiful. So I wanted to share that. I hope maybe some of you found this fun, and maybe there's some out there who are computer programmers or computer science experts or into physics, remembering, oh, I'm seeing how this maps in with the DNA, or maybe somebody's seeing it in computer programming, or somebody's seeing it in the world of finance. I don't know. And maybe there's those that are watching this that might have had some synchronicities that added to this and might find it fun. So in love and light, I'm going to pause just for a moment. And overall, I just wanted to share overall just how to play with words, how I play with it. And what happens is then when I use this to essentially divinate in my world what I'm feeling or experiencing or tapping into. And I can play with this and I don't have to figure it all out. That's the other thing I wanted to share. So I could go on and on and on about this and kind of share some of the things that I'm seeing on and on and on in this living light code. But part of it is just about, wow, that's cool. I love to express in this way. And we can play with our reality in so many different dynamics, in so many different dynamic ways, in so many different dynamic expressions. And so I hope this encourages, if anything, encourages anyone watching this to play in your own way, and utilize your gifts. And maybe it's writing, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's teaching, maybe it is mathematics, which is another thing to remember, that this is all shapes and geometries and colors and sounds. So whatever floats your boat, right? Life is but a dream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Anyways, in love and light, guys, have fun creating. Namaste.